The rumble of motorcycles echoed against the weathered walls of Charlie's roadside diner, a humble establishment perched on the curve of Highway 16 just outside of Sedona, Arizona. It was the kind of place travelers stopped when they wanted authentic food served without pretense: checkered tablecloths, vinyl booths worn smooth by decades of denim-clad patrons, and a menu that hadn't changed since 1978. On this particular Saturday afternoon in late September, the parking lot was dominated by gleaming Harleys and custom choppers belonging to the Desert Wolves, a motorcycle club based out of Phoenix. Their weekend rides often brought them to this stretch of road, where the red rock formations provided a dramatic backdrop for their chrome-heavy machines. Inside, the diner hummed with conversation and the clatter of plates. The bikers occupied the largest corner of the restaurant, a rowdy island of leather vests emblazoned with their club insignia, a howling wolf against a blood-red moon. Their laughter carried above the ambient noise as they traded stories and good-natured insults over plates of Charlie's famous chicken-fried steak. At the counter, separated from the boisterous group by 4 empty stools, sat a solitary figure nursing a cup of black coffee. He was lean and appeared to be in his mid-50s, with shoulder-length dark hair streaked with gray and a few days' worth of beard shadowing his face. Dressed in well-worn jeans, dusty motorcycle boots, and a simple black t-shirt under an unzipped brown leather jacket, there was nothing particularly remarkable about him, except perhaps for the quiet intensity with which he studied the worn photograph he'd placed on the counter beside his coffee cup. The man had arrived about 30 minutes earlier on an older model arch motorcycle, its design distinct from the chromed-out cruisers favored by the Desert Wolves. He'd parked away from their gleaming formation, in a spot partially shaded by a gnarled juniper tree. When he'd walked in, removing his helmet and sunglasses, a few heads had turned briefly before returning to their conversations. In a place frequented by riders, another lone motorcyclist barely warranted notice. Mac Daniels, the self-appointed leader of the Desert Wolves present that day, had observed the newcomer with mild interest. At 48, Mac sported a meticulously maintained salt and pepper beard and arms covered in elaborate tattoos. His leather vest was adorned with more patches than any other member, a testament to his seniority and the miles he'd logged on the road. "Check out Sad Keanu over there," Mac said, nodding toward the solitary figure at the counter. "Looks like someone stole his puppy." Several of his companions chuckled, glancing over at the man who seemed oblivious to their attention as he continued to contemplate the photograph. Lisa, the diner's most experienced waitress, refilled the stranger's coffee cup. "You need anything else, hon?" she asked, her voice carrying the warm rasp of a lifelong smoker. "No, thank you," the man replied, looking up with a small but genuine smile that briefly transformed his melancholy expression. "The coffee's perfect." His voice was surprisingly gentle for someone with such a road-worn appearance, and something about his polite demeanor made Lisa pause. She glanced at the photograph he'd been studying, a faded image of a desert landscape with rock formations similar to those visible through the diner's windows. "Pretty spot," she commented. "Looking for it?" "Yes," he nodded. "It's where my friend wanted his ashes scattered. Said it was where he found peace once." "Sorry for your loss," Lisa said sincerely. "Thank you," the man replied. "It was a while ago, but promises don't expire." Lisa nodded in understanding. "If you need directions to anywhere around here, just ask. Been serving coffee in this diner for 23 years. I know every rock and cactus within 50 miles. As she moved away to attend to other customers, the man returned his attention to the photograph. From the corner, Mac continued his running commentary, his voice growing slightly louder as his companions encouraged him with their laughter. $10 says he's some Hollywood wannabe practicing his brooding look for a vampire movie," Mac said, taking a swig of his beer. "Probably rides that fancy bike on weekends and drives a Prius during the week." The stranger seemed not to hear, or perhaps had chosen to ignore the commentary. He finished his coffee, left a generous tip, and carefully tucked the photograph into the inner pocket of his jacket before sliding off the stool. As he headed toward the door, his path took him past the biker's table. Max stretched out his legs, forcing the man to step around them. Nice boots, Mac commented, his tone making it clear the observation was not a compliment. Italian? The stranger paused, looking down at his well-worn motorcycle boots. American, actually. Same pair for almost 15 years. Huh, Mac said, clearly disappointed by the reasonable response. And what about that fancy arch out there? That's not exactly a bike for serious riders. A flicker of something, perhaps amusement, crossed the stranger's face. It gets me where I need to go. One of the younger bikers, a muscular man with a shaved head who'd been introduced to the group as Diesel, leaned forward. Those bikes are like $100,000, man. What do you do for a living that lets you ride something like that? The stranger hesitated, seeming to consider how much to share. I'm in the entertainment industry. This vague response drew exactly the reaction he seemed to have anticipated, smirks and exchanged glances among the bikers. Entertainment industry, Mac repeated with exaggerated emphasis. So what, you direct pornos or something? The man's face remained impassive, but something in his eyes suggested he was accustomed to such assumptions. No, nothing like that. Let me guess, you're a stuntman, Diesel pressed, his tone mocking. You look like one of those guys who falls down for a living. At this, a genuine smile briefly crossed the stranger's face. I have done some stunt work, yes. This admission seemed to delight the bikers, confirming their suspicions that he was somehow inauthentic, a Hollywood type playing at being a real rider. I knew it, Mac exclaimed, slapping the table. Let me guess, you're on your way to some fancy meditation retreat to find yourself, right? The stranger's patience appeared limitless. Actually, I'm on my way to fulfill a promise to an old friend. Like I said, he wanted his ashes scattered in a specific place not far from here. Something in his tone, the simple sincerity of it, momentarily silenced the group. Death was something all riders understood as a constant companion on the road. Mac recovered quickly. Well, don't let us keep you from your important mission, Hollywood. The red carpet awaits. The stranger nodded politely and continued toward the door. As he reached for the handle, a young woman hurried in, nearly colliding with him. She looked to be in her early 20s, with a name tag identifying her as Jenny, one of the diner's newer waitresses, according to the whispered conversations that followed her entrance. I'm so sorry I'm late, Lisa, she called out, breathless. My car wouldn't. The words died in her throat as she properly focused on the man standing before her. Her eyes widened, and the apology she'd been delivering transformed into a single astonished word. Keanu? The diner didn't fall silent. That only happens in movies. But there was a noticeable lull in the ambient noise as several heads turned toward the entrance. The stranger, now revealed as Keanu Reeves, offered a small, almost embarrassed smile. Hi, he said simply. Jenny seemed frozen in place, her mouth slightly open. I'm so sorry, she finally managed. I've been a huge fan since I was a kid. My dad and I used to watch all your movies together. That's very kind of you to say, Keanu replied, his voice warm but measured. Is your dad still around? No, Jenny said, her expression clouding. He passed away last year. Cancer. Keanu's face registered genuine empathy. I'm sorry to hear that. It sounds like you had a special connection. We did, Jenny nodded, tears suddenly threatening. The last movie we watched together was John Wick. He was too sick to go to the theater, so I set up a projector in his hospital room. The nurses pretended not to notice. Keanu smiled at this, a full smile that transformed his entire face. That's a wonderful memory to have. From the corner table, the bikers had fallen completely silent, watching the exchange with expressions ranging from disbelief to embarrassment. Mac's face had drained of color as the realization of whom he'd been mocking sank in. Would it be okay? Jenny began hesitantly. Would it be too much to ask for a photo? My mom would never believe this otherwise. Of course, Keanu agreed immediately. As Jenny fumbled with her phone, Keanu glanced over at the biker's table. There was no triumph in his expression, no vindication, just a calm acknowledgement of the moment before he returned his attention to the young waitress. After the photo was taken, Jenny clutched her phone like a precious artifact. Thank you so much. This would have meant the world to my dad. What was your dad's name? Keanu asked. Robert, Jenny replied. Robert Schultz, Keanu nodded, as if committing the name to memory. Well, Robert raised a very polite daughter. He must have been a good man. He was, Jenny confirmed, wiping away a stray tear. The best. With a final gentle smile, Keanu excused himself and stepped outside into the Arizona sunshine. Through the diner's large front windows, the patrons watched as he approached his motorcycle, put on his helmet, and prepared to depart. The silence at the biker's table had grown uncomfortable. Diesel was the first to break it. "Dude, we were total assholes," he said, staring into his half-empty beer. "That was Keanu fucking Reeves." Mac nodded slowly, his earlier bravado notably absent. "Yeah, we were." Lisa, who had observed the entire exchange from behind the counter, approached their table with the coffee pot. "More coffee, boys?" "Please," Mac said, pushing his cup forward. After she'd filled it, he asked, "Has he been in here before?" Lisa considered the question. "Once or twice over the years. Always polite, always tips well, never makes a fuss about who he is." Outside, Keanu was still beside his motorcycle, apparently on a phone call. His free hand gestured occasionally as he spoke, pointing toward the majestic red rock formations in the distance. "What do you think he meant about scattering ashes?" Diesel asked, his tone now respectful. "You think that was real?" "Of course it was real," Lisa replied. "Why would he lie about something like that?" The bikers exchanged glances, the weight of their mockery sitting heavily on their shoulders. "I'm gonna go apologize," Mac said suddenly, standing up. "That wasn't right, what we did." Before anyone could respond, the diner's door opened again, and Jenny hurried over to their table, her expression a mix of disbelief and excitement. "Excuse me," she said, addressing Mac directly. "Are you the leader of your group?" Mac nodded cautiously. "I guess you could say that, yeah." "Mr. Reeves asked me to give you a message," Jenny continued, her voice trembling slightly. "He's on the phone with his friend's widow right now. Apparently, there's a specific rock formation where his friend wanted his ashes scattered, but it's pretty remote. He was going to rent a Jeep to get there, but he wondered if your group might be interested in riding out with him instead. He said something about bikers understanding the importance of final requests better than most." The table fell silent as the bikers processed this information. It was Diesel who finally spoke, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. "He wants us to ride with him? After how we acted?" Jenny shrugged. "That's the message. He's outside if you want to talk to him directly." Mac looked at his companions, then back to Jenny. "Tell him we'll be right out." As Jenny hurried back outside, the bikers gathered their things in a subdued manner, leaving generous tips on the table. Lisa watched them with a knowing expression. "That's the thing about judging people," she said as Mac passed her. "Sometimes the universe finds a way to make you eat your words." Mac nodded, accepting the gentle rebuke. "Yes, ma'am." Outside, the desert sun beat down mercilessly on the asphalt parking lot. Keanu had just finished his call and was consulting what appeared to be a paper map spread across the seat of his motorcycle when the bikers approached. "Mr. Reeves," Mac began, extending his hand, "I want to apologize for how we behaved in there. It was disrespectful and uncalled for." Keanu looked up, studying Mac's face for a moment before accepting the handshake. "No harm done," he said simply. "The waitress said you needed some help getting to a remote location?" Keanu nodded, pointing to a spot on his map. "My friend River and I traveled through here years ago, before either of us had much success in the industry. He found this place, said it was where he felt most at peace. Before he died, he made me promise that when the time was right, I'd bring part of his ashes here." The bikers exchanged glances, the name River registering with some of them. "River Phoenix?" Diesel asked quietly. Keanu nodded, a shadow crossing his face. "It's been 30 years, but a promise is a promise." Mac cleared his throat. "We'd be honored to ride with you, Mr. Reeves. Just lead the way." "Please, call me Keanu," he replied. "And thank you. I think River would have appreciated the escort. He always said the best people were the ones who lived outside society's expectations." The simple statement, delivered without pretense, resonated with the bikers in a way that no apology could have matched. Here was a man they had mocked for being inauthentic, revealing a depth of loyalty that spanned decades. As they prepared their motorcycles, Keanu folded his map and secured a small wooden box in his saddlebag. The desert wolves arranged themselves in formation, with Mac indicating that Keanu should take the lead position, an honor usually reserved for the most respected rider. "I don't know the exact way," Mac explained. This is your journey. Keanu nodded in understanding and took his place at the front of the line. With a roar of engines that drew curious stares from within the diner, the unlikely procession pulled onto Highway 16, heading toward the ancient red rocks that stood sentinel over the Arizona desert. The ride took them off the main highway onto progressively rougher terrain, following old service roads that eventually gave way to little more than dirt tracks winding through juniper and sage. The bikers, accustomed to well-maintained highways, found themselves challenged by the terrain, but determined to continue. Keanu navigated with confidence, occasionally checking the faded photograph against the landscape, until, after nearly an hour, he raised his hand signaling the group to stop. Before them stretched a vista of breathtaking beauty, a hidden canyon whose walls glowed crimson in the late afternoon sun, with a single spire of rock rising from its center like a natural cathedral. Keanu dismounted, removing his helmet and gazing at the scene with quiet reverence. The bikers followed suit, forming a loose semicircle behind him, instinctively understanding that they were witnessing something deeply personal. "This is it," Keanu said softly, retrieving the wooden box from his saddlebag, exactly as he described it. The bikers remained respectfully silent as Keanu walked to the edge of the canyon, opening the small box to reveal a portion of ashes. For several minutes, he stood motionless, perhaps communing with memories or gathering his thoughts. Then, with a gentle motion, he released the ashes into the wind, watching as they danced momentarily in the golden light before dispersing across the ancient landscape. When he returned to the group, his eyes were bright with unshed tears, but there was a calmness to his expression, the serenity of a promise fulfilled. "Thank you," he said simply. "Having you all here made this more fitting somehow. River always valued authentic experiences and real people over Hollywood illusions." Mac, who had been uncharacteristically quiet throughout the journey, stepped forward. "We're the ones who should be thanking you," he said, his gruff voice softened with emotion. "You could have just walked away back there, but instead, you invited us to be part of something meaningful." Keanu shrugged, a gesture somehow both humble and profound. Life's too short to hold grudges, and sometimes the people you least expect become important parts of your story. As the group prepared for the return journey, the atmosphere had transformed completely. The earlier mockery had been replaced by a genuine camaraderie, born not from celebrity worship, but from the shared experience of something authentic and deeply human. Back in the parking lot of Charlie's roadside diner, as the sun began to set behind the distant mountains, the desert wolves gathered around Keanu one last time. "Where are you headed next?" Mac asked. "Back to work." Keanu replied, "We're finishing up a film in New Mexico." "John Wick 5?" Diesel asked hopefully. Keanu laughed, a genuine, unguarded sound. No comment. "Listen," Mac said, his expression serious. "The Desert Wolves do a charity ride every year for the Children's Hospital in Phoenix. If you're ever in the area again, we'd be honored to have you join us. No publicity, no photos, just riding for a good cause." Keanu considered the invitation, then reached into his jacket and produced a simple business card with only a phone number. "I can't make promises with my schedule, but call this number when you have the details. If I can make it work, I will." Mac accepted the card with surprising reverence. "Thank you, man. Seriously." With final handshakes all around, Keanu mounted his motorcycle and prepared to depart. As he fastened his helmet, he looked at the group one last time. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "River used to say that the measure of a person isn't how they act when everyone knows who they are, but how they behave when no one is watching." He paused, the hint of a smile crossing his face. "Or when they think the guy at the counter is just some random dude on a bike." The bikers laughed, accepting the gentle rebuke with good nature. With a final nod, Keanu started his engine and pulled away, soon disappearing around a bend in the highway. Inside Charlie's, Lisa and Jenny watched through the window as the bikers remained in the parking lot, engaged in animated conversation. "Well, would you look at that?" Lisa commented. "I've been serving those boys for years, and I've never seen them look so thoughtful." "It's the Keanu effect," Jenny replied, still clutching her phone with the precious photo. "My dad always said he was the most genuine person in Hollywood." Lisa nodded sagely. Sometimes people need a mirror held up to show them who they really are, or who they could be. Outside, as the desert sky painted itself with the fierce oranges and purples of an Arizona sunset, Mac Daniels pulled River Phoenix's Wikipedia page up on his phone, reading it aloud to the younger members who knew the name only vaguely. The group listened with uncharacteristic attentiveness, suddenly aware that they had been part of a 30-year journey of friendship and loyalty, a promise kept across decades. The following year, the annual Desert Wolves charity ride for Phoenix Children's Hospital had an unexpected participant. He arrived without fanfare on his arch motorcycle, politely declined interviews, and rode in the middle of the pack rather than at its head. No official photographs were taken, by his request, though rumors of his participation doubled the event's donations. When asked by a local reporter why Keanu Reeves would choose to ride with a group of previously unknown bikers, Mac Daniels simply smiled. "Let's just say we had a moment of clarity together," he replied, and learned that the most impressive thing about a person isn't what they ride or how they look, it's how they treat others when there's nothing to be gained. That evening, after the charity ride had concluded, Keanu joined the Desert Wolves at Charlie's roadside diner. Lisa served them coffee with a knowing smile, and Jenny, now promoted to assistant manager, pretended not to notice the Hollywood star in their midst, though her father's photo with Keanu now hung proudly behind the counter. As the diverse group of riders shared stories and laughter, the distinction between celebrity and biker, between Hollywood and highway, dissolved into something more essential. A circle of people connected by respect, by shared experience, and by the understanding that genuine character reveals itself not in moments of recognition, but in the quiet choices we make when we believe no one of consequence is watching. And perhaps, in the whisper of wind through the juniper trees surrounding the hidden canyon, River Phoenix would have approved of how his final journey had brought together such unlikely companions, all authentic in their own way, all part of the ongoing story that connects us, even after we're gone.